The moon was a sliver of bone in the black sky, offering just enough light to etch the sharp edges of the mesas against the horizon. Silas slept the way a man does in country that can kill him, lightly, with one ear tuned to the world. It wasn't the call of a coyote or the shift of his horse that woke him. It was a change in the cold. The thin wool of his blanket, usually a scant shield against the desert's nightly chill, felt heavier, warmer. He didn't move. His hand, resting near the butt of his Colt, stayed where it was. Years of trailing cattle and dodging trouble had taught him that the first man to move is often the first man to die. He opened his eyes to slits, letting them adjust. The fire was down to a pile of winking red eyes, and there, beside him, was the source of the warmth. A human form, small and still, had slipped under his blanket. His mind catalogued the possibilities, none of them good. He was 100 miles from any town, deep in territory where lines on a map meant less than the flow of water. Slowly, he turned his head. It was a woman. Her hair was a black spill against the dusty ground, and the line of her jaw was sharp and proud even in the faint light. She wore a buckskin dress, beaded in a pattern he didn't recognize. Apache. Every instinct screamed danger, but it was a quiet, perplexing danger. She wasn't armed, at least not that he could see, and she was sleeping, or pretending to, with a stillness that was either absolute trust or a deadly trap. He chose to believe it was the latter. He sat up in one fluid motion, not fast, but deliberate, moving the blanket aside. The cold air hit her, and her eyes snapped open. They were dark, unreadable, and held no fear. She looked at him, then at the vast, empty dark around them, and then back at him. "You are on my sleeping roll," Silas said. His voice was rough with sleep, a low rumble that didn't carry. The woman pushed herself up to a sitting position. She didn't scramble or apologize. She simply met his gaze. It was the only source of warmth not guarded by a sleeping horse. Her voice was low and clear. She spoke his language with a precision that suggested she'd learned it carefully, choosing each word like a smooth stone from a riverbed. Silas grunted, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the fire. Folks who crawl into a man's bedroll in the middle of the night are usually after one of two things, his purse or his person. My purse is empty, and I'm not in a welcoming mood. A flicker of something, not quite humor, but a dry acknowledgement of his words, crossed her face. "Your assumptions are as vast as this land, cowboy, and just as empty." She paused, pulling the edge of his blanket around her shoulders, a gesture of necessity, not comfort. "I am not seeking a man. I am hiding from them." He considered her. She was young, but her eyes held the kind of ancient weariness he'd seen in men twice her age. There were no signs of a struggle, no bruises or torn clothing. She carried herself with an unnerving composure. "Hiding from who?" he asked. "My own people," she said, and the words hung in the air between them, colder than the night itself. That was a complication he didn't need. Trouble with her people was trouble he couldn't afford. He ran a hand over his jaw, the rasp of his stubble loud in the silence. "Why?" She looked at the dying embers of the fire, her profile sharp and noble. "I am Nalin. I am a healer for the Chihene, or I was. A child in our camp was taken by the fever shakes. The medicine man, Kale, said his spirit was weak and should be allowed to journey on. He wished to perform the rites." She turned her gaze back to Silas, and he felt the full weight of her conviction. The boy's spirit was not weak. His body was. I knew an herb, a bitter root from the high mountains that could break the fever. Kyle forbade it. He said it would interfere with the spirits. Silas waited. He knew enough to know that to defy a medicine man was a grave offense. "I gave the boy the root anyway," Nolan said, her voice dropping but losing none of its certainty. "I did it while the camp slept. This morning, his fever was broken. When Kyle discovered what I had done, he was enraged. He said I had defied the spirits and brought dishonor to our ways. He said I had stolen the boy's journey from him." "And the boy?" Silas asked. "He will live," she stated, as if it were the only fact that mattered. "Kale declared me outcast. He and 2 others follow me now, not to bring me back, to ensure the spirits are appeased." Silas understood. Appeased was a soft word for what they intended. He looked out into the darkness again, a place that had seemed merely empty a few moments ago but now felt full of unseen watchers. He was a solitary man by nature and by trade. He courted no trouble, started no fights he couldn't finish, and made a point of minding his own business. This woman, with her quiet pride and her life-or-death dilemma, was the biggest piece of other people's business he'd ever stumbled across. "They will be tracking you," he said. It wasn't a question. "They are skilled," she acknowledged. "But I am small, and the night was dark. I left a confusing trail. They will likely cast a wide circle at sunrise. This camp, it is in that circle." She wasn't asking for help. She was stating a fact, laying the pieces on the ground between them for him to see. He was part of her story now, whether he liked it or not. He could tell her to leave, to take her trouble elsewhere. He could ride off at first light and never look back, or he could do nothing and see what the sunrise brought. He looked at her, truly looked at her. She wasn't a damsel in distress. She was a woman who had made a choice based on her own code of honor and was now prepared to face the consequences. In her place, he knew he would have done the same. Doing the right thing when no one was watching was one thing. Doing it when the whole world was watching and promising to kill you for it was another thing entirely. "The coffee will be ready when the sun is up," Silas said, turning his attention to the fire. He laid a few more pieces of dry mesquite on the embers. "You can stay till then." It wasn't a promise of protection. It was a stay of execution. And for now, it was enough. Nolan gave a single, curt nod and settled back down, leaving a respectable foot of space between them. The warmth of the rekindled fire began to push back the dark. The sun rose like a smear of blood, coloring the eastern sky in violent shades of orange and red. Silas was already on his second cup of coffee, black and bitter, when he saw the dust. It was far off. 3 riders moving at a steady pace, their forms small against the immense landscape. Nolan saw it too. She stood beside him, a motionless silhouette. She had not eaten the jerky he offered, but had accepted a cup of coffee, which she held in her hands as if to warm them. "They will be here soon," she said. "Get your things. There's a wash behind that ridge of rocks. It's deep. Stay down and don't make a sound," he ordered, his voice flat. She looked at him, a question in her eyes. "And you?" "I'm just a cowboy making his breakfast," he said, kicking a little dirt to obscure any sign of her presence. "Go." She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then turned and moved with a fluid grace, disappearing into the rocks as if the earth had swallowed her whole. Silas sipped his coffee, his posture relaxed, his eyes on the approaching riders. He looked like what he was, a man alone, weary from the trail, with no reason to hurry. The 3 Apache warriors reined in their ponies about 20 yards from his camp. They were hard-faced men, their eyes narrowed against the sun's glare. The one in the center, broad and imposing, with a hawk-like nose, had to be Colt. He surveyed the camp, his gaze missing nothing. "You have seen a woman?" Colt asked, his voice sharp. Silas took another slow sip of coffee before answering. He looked up at the man, his expression one of mild curiosity. "Morning to you too," he said. "Can't say I have. Just me and my horse since I left the Pecos." Kyle's eyes roamed over the campsite. He noted the single bedroll, the single cup, the saddle meant for one rider. But he was a man who trusted his instincts, and something felt off. "She is an outcast. She defied the spirits. It is our duty to find her." "Sounds like your business," Silas said, his tone neutral. He tossed the dregs of his coffee onto the fire where they hissed and steamed. "I got business of my own." One of the other warriors dismounted and walked the perimeter of the camp. His eyes were sharp, scanning the ground. Silas's heart hammered, a slow, steady beat against his ribs. He had done his best to cover Nolan's tracks, but he wasn't a tracker of their caliber. The man stopped near the rocks where Nolan was hiding. He bent down, his attention caught by something on the ground. A single, dark strand of hair caught on a thorny bush. He picked it up, holding it between his fingers. He looked at Kyle, then at Silas. Silas didn't flinch. He met the warrior's gaze, his own face a mask of bored indifference. He didn't reach for his gun. He simply stood there, a man with nothing to hide, waiting for them to finish their business so he could start his day. It was the most convincing lie he had ever told. Cale watched the exchange, his eyes moving from his man to the cowboy. He saw no fear in the white man, no deceit, only a stubborn, placid stillness. Perhaps the hair had been there for days, a relic of some other traveler. To challenge this man would mean bloodshed, and for what? A hunch? After a long, tense moment, Cale gave a short, sharp nod. The warrior flicked the strand of hair away and remounted his horse. "If you see her," Cale said, his voice a low threat, "do not help her. The spirits will mark you as well." Silas just nodded. "I'll keep that in mind." The 3 men turned their horses and rode on, their backs straight, their purpose unwavering. Silas watched until they were small figures once again, swallowed by the vastness of the plains. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. Nolan emerged from the rocks, her face unreadable. She walked to the fire and stood across from him. The silence stretched, filled only by the whisper of the wind. She had watched the entire exchange, had seen the moment her life hung on the thread of a cowboy's nerve. He had passed a test he hadn't even known he was taking. She reached into a small pouch at her belt and took out a small, intricately beaded amulet. She held it out to him. "This is for you," she said. Silas looked at the object, then at her. "I don't need payment." "It is not payment," she corrected him, her tone firm. "It is an acknowledgement. You stood between me and my fate. You did not have to. The lie you told was a good one." He took the amulet. It was cool and smooth in his palm. "Only lie when it matters," he said, echoing his own thoughts. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, the first he had seen. A good rule, for any man. They traveled together for 2 days, moving west toward the Dragoon Mountains. They spoke little, but a new understanding existed between them. He taught her how to reload his Winchester, and she showed him which plants held water and which snake tracks to fear. It was a partnership born of necessity, but it was growing into something else. On the 3rd morning, as they looked out at the jagged peaks that were her destination, Silas knew a decision had to be made. There's a fort, Fort Bowie,